Yeah, thanks, Kara. And I'll disable the waiting room after they come in.
Okay.
Are you letting him in, Eddie, or do you need me to? Great.
Hello.
Hello,
Everyone, welcome.
Hi, everybody.
We're just
Hi,
letting
Stephen.
Hey.
letting everyone enter from the waiting room. Give us just a second. Thank you.
Okay.
How's that look? I think we're all in.
We're all in, Tracy?
I think so. Patrick, would you like to kick us off?
All right. So welcome, everybody. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Patrick Bryan, the Executive Director of the Riverside Arts Council and part of the team of Arts for IE, as well as a member of the Board of Directors of Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates. And at this time, I'd like to introduce a couple of the other people that are involved. We have Jenny Kane, who is the Executive Director of Arts Connection. She's also on the board for Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates. Josiah Bruni, who unfortunately cannot be with us today, and also Vanessa Vizard, who is a member of the Board of Directors for Music Changing Lives, and she has been an integral part of getting Arts for IE off the ground. She's going to take over. No, actually, no, that doesn't come until a little bit later. Sorry about that. I'd like to talk about what's coming up with the agenda. So you guys can see this. I'm not going to read the whole thing. 10 minutes for a welcome. We've got about 25 minutes for updates from Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates, as well as some Q&A. Some field reflections will be coming up. Strengthening local advocacy in your region. That's going to be something that's led up by our very own Jenny Kane. And we'll close out at 2:20 for a prompt ending at 2:30. And now the aforementioned introduction of Vanessa Vizard. Vanessa, once again, an instrumental part in forming Arts for IE. She's going to lead us through some of the guidelines for today's meeting. Vanessa.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you everybody for joining the call today. So just a few housekeeping rules and guidelines. So if you would like to enable closed captioning, you just need to click the live transcription in your Zoom menu bar. So feel free to enable that if you need it. Also, if you have a question, feel free to use the raise hand function. You can find that in your reactions tab in the menu bar. And then also, if you are not speaking, we do ask that you please mute your audio just to be mindful of others that are talking and to eliminate any background noise. Also, be mindful of your own input and be on topic. Please, no long speeches, as we do want to stay on task. The next guideline is use the wait, which is why am I, aren't I talking? So let others speak and finish their thoughts, make space and take space equitably. We also ask that you use the chat to share any available resources for your community, your organization, and we will be sure to include those in a follow-up email. And also this meeting will be recorded so we can make it available to you at a later viewing. So thank you. I'm gonna pass it back to Patrick.
Okay, at this point, I would like to introduce Tracy Hudak. She is a member of the staff of Californians for the Arts. And if you give me 1 sec, I'll give you her exact title.
Oh, I've got it.
Okay, well, I want to say it. Manager of Programs and Organizational Advancement of Southern California. So Tracy, take it away.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And next slide, please, Eddie. Thanks. Let me introduce everyone from our team. Of course, Julie Baker, our Executive Director. If you could raise, staff team, if you could raise your hand, use the raise hand function. Thank you. Julie Baker, our Executive Director. Kara Smith is my counterpart in Northern California. I'm in Southern California. She's in Northern California, Programs and Organizational Advancement. And Eddie Robes is our manager of communications and field engagement. And we're so grateful to have you here with us. And this slide provides contact information for our partners. Jennifer Kane, Patrick Bryan, and Josiah Bruni were invaluable collaborators on this for this conversation, and we're very grateful. And just to note, all of our slides are going to be chock full of information and links to other resources. And this is really intended to be a reference document for you. We will be providing it as a PDF and a follow-up email later next week. So if we don't get to everything on the slides, it's there for you for your reference later. And next slide, please. Thank you. And I'd like to welcome you to the third annual iteration of our statewide regional conversations. The regional conversations that we've had with you have been invaluable in informing and shaping our work and empowering us to fight for you. And Julie Baker will be talking about the accomplishments from last year's regional conversations, as well as updates on state and federal legislation and budget priorities and things in just a moment. And I just wanted to share a couple of technical things with the Zoom. If you're not seeing your speaker, you can click up on the right-hand corner and play with the different views. And then also, when it is time for discussion and using the raise hand feature, that is under the reactions icon at the bottom of the Zoom. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for introducing yourselves in the chat. So for now, I'd like to hand over the mic to Julie Baker so she can give us those updates.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tracy. And thanks so much to our partners here in Inland Empire for joining us today and pulling this together. And we have so many amazing board members from that region, Patrick, Josiah, and Jenny. So you guys are all incredibly well represented at the state level in terms of what's happening and lifting up your region's priorities. Just quickly, my name is Julie Baker. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And today I'm zooming in from the unceded land of the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan in a town today called Nevada City, California. I'm about an hour outside of Sacramento, where normally I would be pretty much 3 to 4 days a week with the legislative session now beginning. But with the Omicron variant and the continued spread of COVID, we are all still working from our dining room tables. And so I just wanted to share quickly, we have 2 organizations, the staff that was introduced our work on. California Arts Advocates is a C4 or a lobbying organization. We have a lobbyist in Sacramento. We are our goal there is to really influence the legislature, the administration to prioritize and fund the creative arts, culture, and creative industries, and to create protections and legislation to serve our workforce as well. It's important that we show up in a lot of different types of rooms. So I just came today from a travel tourism caucus meeting where you had hotels represented, restaurants represented, wineries represented, the ski industry represented, and we are there representing the arts. So it's really critical that we're entering into these rooms and we can influence to make sure that we are being talked about and that we are being integrated into these pots. In addition, we have Californians for the Arts, which is a C3, a nonprofit organization, and really there we are building public awareness of the value of our industry, as well as giving you the tools to be effective advocates and translation of policy, what's happening at the state and federal level that you should know about that impacting you as someone who's working in the arts. Next slide. I also just want to share who we are as an organization, what we are committed to in practice. We believe that arts and access to the arts is a human right. And we seek to support policies that position the arts to address the inequities that have led to a chronic state of injustice and oppression. I'm not going to read our whole statement of values here, but what I want to share is that we are on a journey to be an anti-racist organization. I say it as a journey because we know that it is not just a statement that I'm putting in front of you that says now we are complete in that journey. This is ongoing. And we are working on it both in our internal policies and our practices and our procedures, as well as in what we fight for the sector at the state and federal level. We hold our own selves accountable, and we try to be transparent in the work that we're doing, but we also ask you to hold us accountable and ask you to also join us in this journey as well. Next slide. Just quickly, what you helped us to achieve in this last year in your advocacy and in your work that you did were some really historic things here in the state of California. In fact, we're really being watched as a state that's being very forward thinking in supporting this industry. And it's really exciting to get that form of acknowledgement from around the United States. We saw over $600 million invested into arts recovery this last year. We joined in coalition with NEVA, National Independent Venues Association of California, and California Association of Museums. And together we asked for $1 billion for their recovery. And at the end of the legislative and budget season last year, we saw over $600 million. Definitely historic levels. We saw you engage at historic levels as well, sending in emails, meeting with your legislators, just engaging in advocacy. And we certainly hope that this is a trend that continues, because we have made incredible strides these last several years to really show people that when they miss something, that really makes, they recognize that that what we do is essential to their lives, whether that's socially, emotionally, or economically. And we want to continue this momentum into a movement. We also were able to see the first creative workforce bill signed into law, which I'll talk about in a minute. And we saw mayors and other civic leaders really lift up how important it is for arts and culture to survive this last several years, and what that does to really make a difference in all communities across the state, from rural to suburban to urban. It makes a huge difference to have healthy arts and culture. Next slide. So quickly, again, some highlights from our organization this last year. We did an impact survey. This type of data really informs and helps us to build our case making. This, in fact, we released that report last year with the Otis report on the creative economy, and we're even quoted in the New York Times stating that if the state of California doesn't do something to help the recovery of our sector, and to also look at the creative workforce pipeline, that California could face a cultural depression. And with California, over 8% of the gross domestic product is in the creative industries. If this is not restored and is healthy, and we continue to see a pipeline of new workers into this industry, California will have significant issues. And so that's something that we lifted up, and it really did, that sort of information helps to inform what we do at the state level and on our lobbying side. We mobilized task forces around reopening guidelines. Hey, it was just a year ago that not only were we shut down, we weren't even on the blueprint for reopening. It feels like it was many years ago. It was only a year ago. So we did a task force on that. We created campaigns called Restart Arts California and Artists are Second Responders, which many of you engaged in. We produce webinars. We do a big activation in April called Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month. We were also instrumental in supporting organizations to apply for the California Relief Grant and California's Venues Grant program. And then we also saw that the California Arts Council, the state arts agency, only released 21% of applicants who applied last year in July received funding. We quickly mobilized the sector, said we need more money immediately out, or at least making sure these grants are funded. And they doubled down with your help of over 1,100 of you signing a petition within 6 days. Of course, that funding has still, many of you have not received, even though it was approved, some of that in August, September, and we hope to see that coming in early February is the promise from the Arts Council at this point in time. Next slide. And again, I'll talk more about the California Creative Workforce Act in a second. We also were able to get funding specifically for cultural institutions in the California Relief Grant program. Spent a lot of time working with the California Department of Public Health, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Recovery, the California Office of Small Business Advocates, basically making sure, again, that we're in rooms that maybe we hadn't been in before, but talking about workforce development, talking about the arts as small businesses, and really educating policymakers around how we work and how our ecosystem, what it needs to survive, and not only survive, but sustain and hopefully flourish. And that is really what we work towards. We created hearings in the Assembly last year. We'll hope to get another one this year under the Arts Committee. And again, saw a lot of you engage. And then also we worked on the impact of AB 5, specifically on what we could do, whether that's through legislation. I see Beatrice is here from Ophelia's Jump. She was integral to that work on SB 805 Coalition. That resulted in close to $50 million in the budget to support small budget nonprofit arts organizations with budget sizes of under $2 million, with payroll expenses of grants of up to $75,000. And I'll report on that in a second where we are in that process. Next slide, please. All right, so where are we? I just mentioned that grant program. The status of that is not yet open. However, the good news is that what is a request for proposal has been sent out by the Office of Small Business Advocate, and it looks like early March it should open. And so if you're not on our email list, please do add yourself to that. I'm sure the team will put our website down there. It's on the front page of our website, and that way you'll learn about when these programs open. California Venues Grants Program has opened and now closed. If you are someone who applied and are not clear where you stand in the process, please also email our venues grant person, Tara, and she'll be able to help you through that process. We're also working on advocacy this year on that particular program. We believe it will be undersubscribed due to some of the issues with how the legislation was interpreted, and we are concerned we don't want to leave money on the table. So we are working directly with the governor's office, Office of Small Business Advocate, and the legislature to see what we can do to ensure that the intention of that bill actually makes its way into your organizations. Museum grant program, there's $50 million that's been allocated there from last year's budget. That should be opening soon for museums. And then there was over $100 million allocated to the California Arts Council, $40 million for creative youth development, and $60 million for the Creative Core pilot program, which again, I'll talk about in the next couple of slides. On creative youth development, specifically, many of you do arts education programs, arts in schools, arts after schools, jump starts programs. Maybe you've applied for those. The last year, those were actually eliminated because of COVID. You didn't see those coming out of the Arts Council. Those are being reintroduced. Some of them have already opened on January 19th, and $40 million has been allocated specifically for these types of programs from the governor's budget over the next 3 years. So stay tuned for more information on that. But some of those have opened, and I believe they close by March 8th for your applications. Next slide. And the Creative Core pilot program is something that we worked a lot on to educate the administration, the legislature around how artists can be employed, literally paid, not just asked to do it for free or for exposure, but paid to develop communication tools and messaging around specific issues that are important to keep people safe, whether that's public safety, whether that's public health, whether that's wildfire preparedness, climate change, aspects of social engagement, racial injustice. So really excited that that was passed and $60 million is going to that program. California Arts Council has met with community people to see, to develop those guidelines. We believe we'll see those coming out in March, and we hopefully will see that opening up sometime this spring. And in the deck, you'll get some more information and an example of San Francisco's Creative Core program, Artist Core program, and as an example of what you could be looking forward to in terms of the applications. Next slide. And then the governor's budget came out in January. It does as it does every year. He has to make his announcement by January 10th. We, as your advocacy organization, track closely what's in the budget, which is typically hundreds of pages long, specifically for the arts. So you can see me hitting Control F, arts, creative, culture, looking for what's in the budget. And in this case, I'll give you some of the highlights. The California Arts Council, again, the state arts agencies, baseline budget is $26 million. That has not received any change from the governor. However, what he did put in his budget was a $30 million one-time general fund to be spent over the next 3 years to support the 14 existing pilot and to expand that program. We are in support of this. In addition, just under $200,000 for the California Poet Laureate and Youth Poet Laureate and literary programs from the California Arts Council, as well as a new program in collaboration through the state Parks Partnership, the California Department of Parks and Recreation, to actually work on art installations in the parks program. So, and that would be performances, 3D, sculptures. It's not a monument program. And then finally, almost $1 billion for arts education. And this would be for K through 6, after school programs and summer programs. So we are watching all of these closely. And we work also on arts education with Create California, which is the leading state advocacy organization for arts ed. Next slide. And just a real quick overview. This is not, you don't have to read all of this. This is just if you really want to understand the California budget process, here's all the detail on how it works and what we do in terms of advocacy. So the next several months, we'll be meeting with budget chairs, we'll be meeting with committee members, we'll be saying we support all of these actions that the governor put in terms of the arts, and we also have some other things that we'd like to introduce, which I'll go into the next slide. By May, you'll see the governor puts out his May revised. You'll get a sense of then where we are again. There'll be some more negotiation. By June 15th, the legislature has to say, this is our budget that we've approved, otherwise they don't get paid. And then within 12 days, the governor vetoes or approves that budget. There's sometimes things get pulled out, they get into separate budgets, there's budget trailer bills. This gets a little bit too much detail, but basically what I want to share is that what the governor's introduced in January is just the beginning of the process. So we've got lots of months to activate around this, and we will certainly give you the tools to help us to lift up what we want to see supported by the state. Next slide. And then here's our actually, I should say also California Arts Advocates advocacy and lobbying priorities. So we do have this bill that we got passed, the California Creative Workforce Act. This is a wonderful program that is the first of its kind in the United States, a workforce development bill specifically for the creative industries. This is to create a new pipeline of workers with an emphasis on diversifying that workforce, working with people who've faced barriers to employment in the past, as well as areas of our state that don't have the access to the arts and to introduction to the creative industries, as well as an insistence, and this is really critical, on a living wage. And why that's important is that I think we all know in the arts that that is not necessarily the case, so that if you enter this workforce. And so we want to make sure that that is a major piece. Now that legislation was signed, and that was really exciting. I can tell you, I've never worked on a bill before. It's not like Schoolhouse Rock. It takes a lot more work than that, but but it was great. It got signed, but it didn't have any money attached. So this year, what we're going to ask you to help us to get is $50 million so we can see liftoff for this program, which would go through the California Arts Council, and it would fund close to 1,000 new jobs. We can get more into detail on that in other times, but right now we want you to really keep an eye out for that. As I mentioned, 805, which was in response to the impact of AB5, the coalition is meeting, determining next steps, and to see if there'll be any specific legislation this year to address that continuing issue and impact to our sector. One of the things that we are going to be looking for a legislator to introduce. Now, if the governor doesn't introduce it, then we have to have someone in the legislature introduce things that we feel would be helpful for the industry. So for example, that baseline budget for the Arts Council is only $26 million. That's about 73 cents per capita per person in California. Whereas we'd like to see it at least $1 would be really nice. So that gets us to 40 million. That's an increase of $14 million. We're likely going to ask for that over the next 3 years. So $42 million. And that would really be about not just these pilot programs, not just these one-time programs, even though they're great, and we'd love to see these arts integration strategies. What we also know is that California Arts Council is consistently oversubscribed, more people applying than they have the funding for, and they have to prioritize. They have to now they're prioritizing $250,000 and under organizations. That means that organizations of $275,000 may not be able to get funding like they've used to. And so we want to make sure that the pie gets larger so more people can receive funding. Maybe that's just for general operations and doesn't have to fit pretzel into these sort of grant applications. $30 million in cultural districts, we were very much in support of. The $50 million for parks installation, art installations. We are hearing from the sector that really, even though government wants to talk about recovery, for many of the people in the arts, we're still in relief. We need relief funding. We need to be able to backfill the intense losses and now the losses that we're finding again this year and this winter. So we are looking at what can be done in those ways, as well as the cost of testing. And then there's an arts education ballot measure that has been introduced that we're tracking closely. And a ballot measure has to get at least 1 million signatures to be able to get on the ballot by November. It's a group from Los Angeles, Austin Butner with Dr. Dre and other people that are really, John Lithgow, who are really in favor of this. Create California has just voted to also support it. And we will likely, our board will be voting soon. And if we do agree to support that, you'll see some activities around that we will be asking for you to support us in to make sure it gets to be a ballot measure. And that would ensure that there's $800 million every year in the general budget from the state of California to go towards arts education, with an emphasis on the school districts that have eliminated those programs, which tends to be Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. All right, next slide. So I just, again, this is, I'm not going to go into great detail. I want to rush through this. I realize it's a lot of information. For me, it's sort of secondhand, shorthand for me, but it may not be for you. I'm available if anyone wants to dig deeper into some of these issues. We'll have some time to ask me questions as well. And you'll also get the slide deck so you can really read about it. You'll see a link to this Creative Workforce Act of 2021 that was passed last year that I mentioned. We want to get $50 million for this year. Senator Ben Allen from Santa Monica, who's also the chair of the Joint Committee, was the person who authored this bill. And so we're about to hear some words from Senator Allen, and he is just an amazing champion for the arts here in the state of California. So take it away, Senator Allen.
Well, hi, everybody. State Senator Ben Allen here. I'm proud to chair the Joint Committee on the Arts, the legislature's Arts Joint Committee. And I just want to welcome everyone to the California for the Arts Winter 2022 Regional Conversations. I'm standing outside our beautiful Capitol, and I want to wish everyone, of course, a very, very happy New Year. And I want to thank the arts community for all the work you've put in over the last couple of years during this incredibly difficult pandemic. We know that artists not only have been at the front lines of suffering and bearing the brunt of the pandemic, but artists have also been at the front line of helping our society respond to and heal from the trauma associated with the pandemic and all the other challenges that we've had as a society over the last couple of years. Artists as second responders coming in and into the breach and helping our society come back together and heal as we have suffered from traumas. This, of course, has been something that I've been talking a lot about as we've been trying to get more money for the arts. And the arts did very well in the 2021-2022 budget. And I'm really happy to see the governor reiterate support for the arts in the upcoming budget proposal that he just presented. It was ridiculous how little we were funding arts when I first got into the legislature, and I'm just proud that we've all been able to come together and dramatically increase funding for arts through grants programs, California Arts Council, arts and education programs, and the list goes on and on. So one of the things I just want to mention, our Creative Workforce Act that we worked together on to get passed, which is going to try to create a mechanism for kids coming from underrepresented groups to get more pathways into the arts and into the creative industries. And it's something we're hoping to get funded, and something I know I'll be working with many people from California for the arts in that endeavor, in that effort. Just our door continues to be open. We're looking for opportunities to bring up new issues relating to arts policy. Everything from the TV film tax credit extension and expansion to arts in schools and what we can do to make sure that kids aren't slipping behind in terms of exposure to the arts in their education, to looking at the issues of arts as a healer, both for veterans, for folks who suffered from all sorts of different types of trauma, and then the everyday challenges that arts and artists have been facing, trying to make ends meet and trying to be successful and thrive under the changing climate here in our state. So I just want to welcome you, to thank you for your continued advocacy and engagement in arts policy. And as always, we have a very open door in our office. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you so much. Happy New Year.
That's great. That's Senator Ben Allen. Many of you have probably worked with him in the past, and we will continue to see his leadership among many other people. We have great support in the legislature for our sector, and we always encourage you to continue to develop those relationships with your own elected officials. I just want to also touch on quickly federal advocacy. We work in that arena as well, and there are actually currently 7 pieces of legislation introduced in Congress in support of the creative industries and workforce. One of them that I'm just highlighting here is the Creative Economy Revitalization Act. 2 legislators from California on the House side, Representative Jay Obernolte and Senator Alex Padilla, support it and have, which is bipartisan support, which is fantastic. And that's $300 million for a WPA-like program for the 21st century. We have a link to that. And then we also have a PDF on what are all the 7 pieces of current legislation. And there's actually a sign-on that we sent in our email email blast this week, that you can sign on to support all 7 if you are authorized to do so from your organization. There's also, just like at the state budget, there's a federal budget, general appropriations for federal agencies like the National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities. You can see that both have been introduced with increases. The infrastructure package has nothing specific for arts, but we're continuing to fight to see if we can get like a 1% for the arts program, things like that in there. How do we interface with transportation and beautifying and our communities, for example. The Shuttered Venues Operators Grant there's current advocacy around allowable expenses moving just from March 2020 to March 2023. Employee retention tax credits, for example, were taken out in the 4th quarter of 2021. There's advocacy around trying to get those reinstated. There are some folks at the Capitol, the Hill in DC, trying to introduce COVID-19 relief targeting disproportionately impacted industries such as live events. So you might see with the $2 billion that's left over from the Shuttered Venues Operators Grant allocation, maybe some more advocacy around trying to have that stay within our field and more funding going out that way. And then finally, last week or the week before, there was a really exciting hearing in the Office of Small Business Committee called The Power, Peril, and Promise of the Creative Economy. 2 representatives from California are on that committee, Representative Judy Chu and Young Kim. And we've been in touch with both offices. And then Judy Chu actually followed up directly to SBA saying, what are you doing to support this industry now again, that we're seeing continued impact from Omicron? So really good advocacy there. And quickly again, to share a video from Senator Alex Padilla, a great supporter for the arts and someone that if you're not in touch with, we encourage you to touch base with and his office as well. Next, let's hear from Senator Padilla.
Hello, Californians for the Arts. I want to thank you for gathering to support and uplift our creative community through this COVID-19 pandemic. Inspiring art enriches our lives and our communities. And California is a global leader in empowering artists of all backgrounds to tell their stories. But the reality is that creative workers were among the hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, with more than 62% experiencing unemployment. That's why in October, I was proud to join a group of my colleagues to introduce the Creative Economy Revitalization Act. This bill will help bolster the creative economy by employing artists and writers to create publicly available art. Now, this measure will also support local artists who continue to feel the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. California's creative economy is also a critical engine of our state's success, generating millions of jobs and billions of dollars in economic activity. As part of my commitment to the arts, I am also working to increase funding for the National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities. Both endowments received an additional $135 million through the American Rescue Plan, a bill that I was proud to support. The ARP also delivered critical relief through economic injury disaster loans, the Paycheck Protection Program, and the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program. As we respond to the changing conditions of the pandemic, I'll continue to advocate for California's artists in the United States Senate. By sharing your voices and stories, you can help pass the Creative Economy Revitalization Act and support the arts in years to come. I thank you for joining this conversation today and look forward to continuing our work together.
So we thank the senator, and again, if you are on our e-list, you'll know when it's time to send in your letters of support for that bill for $300 million. So that ends my overall presentation on where are we on state and federal advocacy. And we just have a little bit of time to see if anyone has any specific questions around or comments around what I just was tried to condense and present and all the things that are happening. So raise your hand, ask questions in the chat if you're a little shy, or if we don't have anything, we'll continue on into the next portion of the agenda. There will be time also for you to more comments, because we definitely want to hear from you, because this is why we're here today. Download, but also really listen. We get so much value from this. So anybody have anything that they'd like to ask at this time? All right, well, hopefully it was so comprehensive. You're all just processing all of that information. And I see thumbs up and nodding heads, so thank you for that. And I'll hand it back to Tracy then to get us into the next part of our conversation today.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, everyone. Eddie, if you want to fire the slide deck back up, we're actually going to ask you some questions. We have a brief survey that we'd like to take some time together to get you started in. You don't have to finish it right now. And Eddie, if you want to go ahead and explain the process, and we'll put the link in the chat.
Hi, Inland SoCal. Yeah, so we're collecting a poll for regional conversations. A lot of this info is going to, help us in our case making. So if you can please, utilize the next 5 to 7 minutes to start filling it out. We do kindly ask that you do come back to it and complete it, as it's very important information for us in our organization and advocacy statewide, as Julie has highlighted earlier. And submit the survey by the end of the meeting or tomorrow, but we do kindly ask that you finish it 5 to 7 minutes. Thank you so much for that input.
You get it started
And
now, and then we'll.
The link is going to be shared on the chat, right?
Yes, it's there now. Thank you. Yeah. And then we're going to open the floor up to discussion to hear from you and hear your thoughts after you get a couple of minutes with the survey. Thank you.
Yeah, and these questions will, kind of stir up some thinking for our discussion after.
We'll just take about one more minute. And again, you can leave your survey open and you might get different ideas by the end of the program. You don't have to finish it right now.
Okay, we're hoping everyone will join us back away from your survey for discussion, but the survey hopefully provided some things to think about to help inform our discussion. What we wanted to do was sort of hear from you and to kind of, we know we asked you for this information in the survey, but we want to share it in this room here and want to hear from each other. So we want to understand, what are your current needs or priorities from the perspective of the work that you do and how you're involved in the arts in your region. So we're hoping you'll just start sharing with us. Feel free to raise your hand, feel free to put comments and thoughts into the chat. And so the question is, what are your current needs or priorities?
Cool. So no one has anything? There are no needs or priorities. Is that what we should assume?
Oh, Sue, are you waving?
Oh, I thought we were
Anna.
typing. I thought we were typing. I'm so sorry. I'm very slow with the computer.
No, you're fine. You can speak up, you can type whatever you want. Hey, Clark, I see your hand raised. Go for it.
Thank you. I have a theater company here in Palm Springs, California, and I would say, besides the obvious impact of COVID, we're struggling with complying to the AB5 requirements, which is impacting, since doing a live theater show involves a lot of people. There's a lot of people now that we have to put on as employees, and that's really impacting our budgets.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Richard mentions like Richard mentioned in the chat as well, recovery funds due to COVID loss of revenue.
Beatrice has her hand up too.
I guess I'm just going to double down on what Clark said. AB5 is a huge burden on us, not because we don't support it, but we can't print money. So the one thing that I think that has not been, that is a gap is in SVOG, for example. One of the ways that Ophelia's Jump is looking to address AB5 is that we need to expand from our 50-seat space to a larger space so that we can hope to get larger audiences. The SVOG and other grants don't allow you to use money for those. They're considered, expansion capital projects and stuff, but they really are a necessary part of what many of the smallest theaters and performing arts companies have to look at in order to increase capacity to bring in funds. So that's something that I think is important.
Beatrice, can you clarify that for me? So expansion funds like capital projects, is that?
They're considered capital projects. Yes, we determined that we need, as a strategy, we only have a 50-seat venue. We are going to expand to 100 seats, along with a lot of other things, in order to, we have not come close to saturating the market. A lot of people still don't know about us, so we have a lot of room to grow with audience. But we have to do what's considered a capital project to do that. And none of that, most of these grants will not allow us to use money for that.
Okay. Well, we did see this last year, and I know you track things pretty closely, was that there were a lot of what we call district asks in the state. So over $200 million went into the districts for specific capital projects. So this is where that relationship with your elected, I can't guarantee that those will come again this year. It's hard to say, but you know, I know Beatrice is an excellent advocate, so she knows a lot about this, but really that lifting it up to them sometimes and telling them why that's critical is, surprisingly, sometimes you get funding directly from your elected to your district for a specific capital project. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there are going to be, which they had been gone for a while, earmarks in Congress. So, and that's another place where you could potentially see funding for capital projects. So I just wanted to lift those two pieces up, but I'm going to also just note that and see what other resources we can find out there for things like that. But that's really helpful to understand as well. So thank you.
Anna also commented on in the chat on the teacher pipeline. I'm assuming arts teacher, after school teacher, and needing to attract more to the region.
It basically overhead funding in general. You know, our teachers actually are our program. We do an after school, we do a variety of after school string, violin, viola, cello, bass training. And up until now, it's hard to find grants that want to fund teacher salaries. We are so remote, off freeway, we're in the armpit of the world. And young teachers can't afford to drive to us. That's a problem. A second problem is that AB5 has caused our overhead costs to double, triple. It's horrifying. We've had to hire a payroll company. And because we paid all our employees on 1099s up until last year and now cannot. And I'm glad AB5 exists in some ways. And for us, it has been a really steep, horrendous climb. And so finding funding for overhead is something that I want to learn to do. And I'm hoping that maybe there are folks in this group or through the California Arts or other organizations that can help us find a way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for lifting all of that up. Couple of things. So as I mentioned, there is, and Beatrice was very instrumental in this work as well, for the close to $50 million that is in the governor's budget. That it should be coming out, I hope, in March. We'll start to see that grant program open. And that would be for up to, depending on your budget, up to $75,000 in support for payroll. Specifically, it really was in response to the impact of AB5 on performing arts organizations with budgets under $2 million. So that's one thing. It's part of why we want to see the baseline budget increase for the Arts Council too. is that when there's specific funding pots, like 40 million for creative youth development, there's probably some things there also you should look at in the Arts Council's creative youth development funding pots. But, and which are great, these one-time allocations that they give, but at the same time, the baseline needs to increase, right? So there's more money for everyone for these overhead costs. And then the almost $1 billion that the governor's put in for the Department of Education for K-6 after school and summer programs. We also are tracking, again, Create California is the lead more on arts ed specifically, but we work closely. So we're trying to understand exactly what that looks like. There hasn't been any specificity in the budget yet to understand that better, but we're tracking that as well. And then AB5, yes. I mean, I have been working on this issue for many years, both trying to understand how to navigate this within our current political climate, at the same time as, we are out there fighting for living wages for artists and trying to say that artists should be paid at the same level as any other professional, right? Like, we are valued, we bring value to our communities and to our people's lives. At the same time, we also understand that we're also systemically undercapitalized. As Beatrice said, we cannot print money. And so how do we balance these two, sort of almost kind of tension points in a sense, right? And I think we're all trying to work collectively towards that. The SB 805 Coalition is an amazing force of folks that have been working on this particular issue. So you'll see us continued. I think the idea of getting a straight exemption it continues to be a real challenge. And so within the legislature, as well as sort of philosophically in terms of what we're all trying to do. So I think, you'll see more work on this issue, hopefully some funding support coming soon. I think it's really important also, and I know this is a little bit of I don't know what the word is. Anyway, is to let all your funders understand this and all of your supporters understand this impact, not just the state, because I think it's really important that people understand that your cost of business has increased dramatically. And yet you're trying to keep tickets and your programs at a level that everybody can afford and make arts accessible in your communities. And so, somebody's going to bear the brunt of this, whether that means that you're going to have to build it into your ticket prices or your tuition, or you're going to have smaller, I used to say to the legislature, you're going to see a lot of monologues, right? Because there's going to be one person performances because they can't afford to have ensembles, things like that. So I think it's really important for us not to only educate the policymakers, but our audiences and our local communities to what is going on and why we need, why you're asking for help is not because, we're not good at what we do. It's because we're trying to provide a really important service within the context of these sort of labor laws. So moving on. Anything else?
Linda's got her hand up.
Yeah. Linda, did you want to make that comment? I see it in there. Did you want to speak to it as well?
If this means Linda Sotelo, I wasn't sure if there was another Linda. Hi, everyone. Everything you're doing on the advocacy side, Julie, and everyone, is incredible. It's commendable, and it's so necessary. But I'm telling you, some of these things is like putting a Band-Aid on a wound that will not heal. I'm mortified. Because we're experiencing firsthand, not only in San Diego, across the state, our inability to fulfill what's going to become a long-term serious issue. You're going to see nonprofits fold. It is impossible to sustain the overhead because it's not just the one thing, right? It's not our unwillingness to obviously pay folks. That is not the issue. We've always been, I think, as an industry, about the value of artistic. The reality is we spend programs and our initiatives. And when we now have to focus on looking not just at overhead, which is untenable for most of us, but overhead that includes other types of benefits and things that including some of the practitioners don't want to be an employee. They want to have the freedom. They want to have the ability to do all kinds of things. So now we're saying, well, we have to, reclassify you or do this. And they're like, but wait, I have all these other things. And to pass that test to be an independent contractor is not tenable, especially for communities of color who don't have the support or the wherewithal to establish businesses as contractors in that formalized way. So I'm really concerned. I mean, I applaud you for raising the funds. It's a Band-Aid. $75,000 is taxes, basically, for 5 staff, is that, payroll taxes or however many. So I think while those things are parallel and important to be happening, the focus needs to be very direct. It needs to really address that issue, exemption or introduction of a different bill. I know that you have 805, on the way in the pipeline, very specific. It sounds like, from what I've read so far, I might be wrong, performing arts, but the scope is so broad for curators, for other artists, for, my gosh, go across the sector, even for marketing and for HR and for all kinds of things. And short of us, institutions like us that are smaller, we're not at $1 million, yet, then what happens is that we have to outsource, and the fees are exorbitant for us to outsource for temporary workers or for services. And it's a disservice for emerging practitioners in our field, which is already a rarefied field for communities of color. For me to get executives or anyone in the pipeline that is a brown person or an Asian or what have you, it's very difficult. So I think this is a serious issue, and however monies we get invested in the workforce development aspect of this are long overdue, first of all, and thank you to the electeds that are really speaking to this at this point. But I think we really need to target our focus and look at this issue of AB5, because if we think we have issues now, I really don't even want to think about 2-3 years from now. There's a study that we should do starting now. Do a benchmark now, who's in business and who's not going to be in the nonprofit sector in 3 years, because I'm really concerned. So I know that I went on and on, but I think we gloss over this issue and we just expect that the ones that are, the operas or the big funded with huge endowments are going to survive. Yeah, they will. But the rest of us are going to be out in the dark, and the rest of us look like me and look like people of color.
Right. Yeah. Everything you said, Linda, it's definitely something we're all trying to work to figure out what is the solution within the political realities of how.
Think about what you need us to do besides letters. If we need to go knock on people's doors en masse, let's do that, because it's not going to go away.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I see Beatrice here, who's exhausted from working on this issue also really hard this last year as one of the leaders of the SB 805 coalition. I was there, but it was very much a grassroots driven strategy. And I know that they're continuing to meet. Our organization on the lobbying side is continuing to do what we can to support. This is another weird year too, because now we're in an election year, and where there's a lot of shakeup potentially in the legislature, and you still, so yes, and yes, and thank you for just very clearly articulating some of the issues and some of the things that we should be thinking about as well. And all I can say is rest assured we will continue to work on this issue, and now we know you're another person we're going to be calling.
And I promise you, when you put that call out, you're going to get a very long list. Yeah. I mean, people are already getting notices for penalties, for interest when they can't meet that obligation quarterly, and they're having to lay off people for reasons beyond COVID, which is shameful, but they have to do with this issue. So the $75,000, that was going to be awesome, but it's a Band-Aid. It's a one time, maybe it's 1 or 2 years, oxygen, but it doesn't address the fundamental issue of the misunderstanding of the contributions of creative economies. And I think that is at the crux of the advocacy that needs to happen. Really get to the pain and not just, when a new legislator introduces another, law or another bill, and then we take the brunt of it, they term out and here we are, or they leave and here we are stuck, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. We understand that. We've done all, and we've been working towards uneducating in that way, but it's a very nuanced and challenging issue, and absolutely continue to address. I just want to also mention that part of what was passed last year was $500,000 that went to California Arts Council for creating a paymaster system that you all could utilize, so you wouldn't have to hire your own payroll systems, and that you could pay into. That has still been sitting at the CAC. Unfortunately, we're waiting on an RFP for that so that we can get that going, so that those expenses, at least that aspect of that expense, can go down for everyone. So yes, agreed. Band-Aid solutions came out last year. I think everyone in the coalition was very clear that we understood it, that was not the ongoing solution. And we're continuing to figure out, again, what is the best way to address this problem within the realities of the political landscape. So that unfortunately is kind of lobbying and advocacy in a nutshell in many ways. But thank you for all of that. And oh, good. Okay. The RFP came out for the 49.5 million. I don't know if it came out for the 500. Okay. I'm going to keep us moving. Thank you, Linda. Really appreciate your comments. And oh, are we going into this? Okay. Well, here we go. What a great transition. So advocacy comes in. I'm going to just do a real short presentation. Folks that our partners thought maybe it'd be helpful to kind of go over some sort of things around, how do you create a good and effective advocacy plan? And so we'll just go a little bit about that. And I think that this is something that I think is absolutely true. It really does take a lot of different types of people. We need the we need the people who are screaming, making it disrupting the system, and then you need the long-term people who are working and developing those relationships that are there as well. So everyone has a role in this, and so we're excited to engage you in this. Next slide. So just some quick advocacy tips. Maybe all of you know this already, but just number one, it's never too late to start the conversation with your elected officials. So start it now. Earmarks with your congressional representatives, capital improvement campaigns that you need to do with your own elected officials. Talk to them, build your case, tell them about what you do, the impact that you make in their particular district, and as much as possible, come armed with both data and those heart stories, those things that really get people to move them. Honestly, advocacy is education, and it is the art of persuasion. I mean, you're there to tell them what the situation is, and persuade them to prioritize you and to make it an important issue for them. In the AB5 arena, for example, Senator Susan Rubio made it her priority issue last year. That was because her constituents persuaded her that this was an important issue. Look for opportunities outside of the usual suspects. So in other words, we have a lot of conversations around housing insecurity for artists and creatives as the cost of living increases here in the state of California. That's not just an issue for our sector. There are other people you can be working with locally, other housing activists that we could be working with, other people within workforce, other issues. It's really important when you're coming in with an issue that you come already with an idea and a plan. How do you think that you can solve this problem? You are the expert in this particular area. The elected officials are not necessarily experts about arts and culture. Very few are. So really come with this idea and how and see how you can look at what your community prioritizes. If it's homelessness, if it's housing, if it's racial inequity, if it's whatever the particular issue of jobs, talk to them and see how you can, in community revitalization, how can the arts play a role in that? And just, advocacy, sadly, I can tell you from my sheer exhaustion, it's a marathon. It's not a quick, you don't get to go and it's done in one quick session. It continues and continues. And so be consistent, develop, maintain those relationships. Don't expect if you show up once that the world's going to change. And I always say this, a lot of us, particularly in the nonprofit arts organization side, you spend a lot of time developing relationships with your funders, whether that's foundations, whether that's individual donors. Think of your potential, your elected officials in that way too. They hold a lot of purse strings. And so prioritize that within your fund development or your strategic plan, and be persistent. Don't give up. Next slide. Here's some 5 steps to effective advocacy. So I'm just going to quickly go on in through this. And again, you'll get all of this. And you've got some great help and people like Jenny Kane and Patrick in your communities and Josiah. But state your goals. What is the change you want to see or problem you're trying to solve? For whom are you doing this? Identify your resources, the capacity, the funding, the time that you have to do that. Who are the people that are the core people who are going to make this happen in your coalition, et cetera. And what kind of people do you need in that? Do you need people doing data? Do you need people who are good writers? What do you need in order for this to be successful? Identify your partners. Who are the people that are going to come with you to make this happen? Is it someone in hospitality and tourism who recognizes that if they don't have, a healthy arts and culture community, that it's going to affect them as well? Ask them to be a part of it. Who might oppose what you're trying to do, and understand how can you build a relationship there or be ready to address that? Who are the influencers, both on the positive and on the negative side? And finally, know the process. When is the right time to bring up an issue? When are they thinking about what they're introducing next year? Where are they in the budget process? All of those things are going to matter. Once you're kind of figured out how you plan your campaign, then you want to think about how are you going to create awareness around this? What are your key messages? Like for us, it was last year, it was restart the arts safely. It was around the artists are second responders, things that were key messages that kind of resonate with people, from the media to the public to your policymakers. And again, build your case with data and storytelling, and then determine your communication strategies. This is a series of op-eds, letters to the editor, social media. Do you have a big budget? Can you do billboards? Can you do bus things? Can you do where are the folks that you need to influence, and how can you get to them in a most effective way? Next slide. You want to generate engagement. So, you've got your sort of like core group of people who are making this happen. Then you want to get to grassroots. You want lots of people, like Linda said, hey, tell us when you want us to show up around this issue. We will show up. That's your grassroots. That's the folks that, when elected officials, they take notice when their constituents care about an issue and consistently show up around that issue. Then they'll start to prioritize it. The amount of letters actually does make a difference. We had over 5,000 letters last year talking about how much we needed this funding. And I can tell you, when we met with the administration, they're like, yeah, we know about your ask, okay? And that's because you all took the time to even send in the sort of letters that we asked, the templated letters, make a difference. So please take, when you see an action alert from its local, state, federal, take that seriously. We're asking for you to do that for a reason. Get others to share your message, and then communicate with your advocates. You got to continue to say, this is where we're at. This is what we need from you next. This is the deadline. This is when we got to get you on board, et cetera. And obviously you're encouraging actions. We don't want to just have a hearing and not say what we want, right? Out of it, you always want to be really clear. What do you want from them? Do you need funding? Is it an ordinance you want changed? Is it legislation that needs to either be rewritten or new legislation introduced? Legislation is essentially trying to solve what they perceive are problems, right? So what is it that you want? What is your ask? Is it a % for the arts program that you want in your community? How you bring examples of that, et cetera. Determine the tactics you're going to use, and read the room. Is it time to be aggressive, or is it time to build consensus? Obviously you always want to be respectful. I believe in everything that you do, and hope that people are coming with good intentions. But when is the time to start causing trouble, good trouble, as it were? And when is the time to bring people with you and to say, no, we have a common goal. How can we get there together? Who are you willing to sacrifice, in a sense, in this process, right? And then you have to sustain the momentum. Again, it's never, ever going to work when you do it once. It has to be consistent. It took years for me in this community that I live in to convince our city council that we were an economic development driver. I ran a performing arts center, and for them to finally, took years and years and years. And now when I'm as an outsider coming in and supporting stuff at the county level, I'm hearing them talk about anchor institutions, and they're talking about the organization I used to run. And that is because we spent years showing up, making that case. So be consistent, be flexible, and also at the end of the day, be hopeful. This is hard work. You got to keep going. And I know it's challenging amidst all the other things that you're trying to do. You're asking me now to add advocacy into this, but I believe that you can. I really do, even if it's at the letter writing stage, or really just, again, incorporating that into your planning, that development of your relationship with your elected official. Next slide. I'm not going to go into great detail around this. You'll be able to receive these, why the arts. Obviously, I would assume all 40 of you here today know why the arts. That's why you show up to go to work every day. But there are very specific things that we've studied that we understand that policymakers care about. And some of that's included in this slide, as well as the next slide. And there's some, really good studies that have been done. National Assembly of State Arts Agency did one as well around, what are the key things that legislators and elected officials want to hear, both on all sides of the spectrum, Republican, Democrat, and et cetera. So those are some here. I'm not going to go into all of those, but you can access those another time. Again, one of the things I want to just highlight, a lot of people are disappointed when they don't get to meet with the actual elected official and they meet with a staffer. And let me just say, meeting with the staffer is a critical relationship to build as well. Oftentimes they are the people who are doing the research. They're the ones bringing the briefs to the elected, who then stands with the blue folders. You probably see them standing with those blue folders. They didn't prepare that information, a staffer did. So become that conduit for information for that staffer, make it easy for them. And I promise you, you'll get a lot more, you'll get ahead. Attend their meetings, attend fundraisers. This is an election year. Show up at those, at their whatever it is that they're doing to raise money, and ask them, what are you doing for the arts? What do you plan to do for arts and culture? What do you plan to do for artists? What do you plan to do for creatives? Absolutely. The more that they hear that, then they'll realize it is an issue that they should care about. If you're on Twitter, follow them there. Thank them when they do something good for the arts. If you don't want, if you're also there, follow us, follow others, and then retweet as well, because again, that does matter. A lot of elected officials are on Twitter. Next slide. There's other strategies you can do, resolutions. Language is really important, what we call socializing language. Resolutions help to do that. Sometimes if you've got, it's like precedent, right? So you establish a precedent that says, when relief or recovery funding is coming in, that your community is going to include arts and culture in that, because we've been disproportionately impacted. You can have a resolution that your city council introduces to that. And then when the funding comes, there's precedent for it. So they don't have to go back anywhere and say, should we do this? It's there. Coalition asks are really great. We did that this past year. It was extremely successful. Look for organizations like ours, Patrick's, Jenny's, who do advocacy within their work. And again, developing relationships with your immediate partners is really, really important. I have a lot of relationships where they call me and they want to understand what's going on at the state level and how it's impacting the arts. We've now become that voice for them, and we make it easy, and we've got the information. You do the same in your local community. Next slide. And I think I'm done, and this hands to Jenny. Am I right? Because that was not my slide. I'm going to hand it to Jenny Kane, and she's going to go over some local strategies at this point in time.
Thanks for that, Julie. I think that primer is really great for this conversation, and we want to save the bulk of it for discussion with all of you. The next few slides are recapping some of the discussion that we had at our State of the Arts Summit back in May. That culminated a year-long survey, focus groups and interviews, talking with all of you in Riverside and San Bernardino about what can you imagine in terms of your boldest vision for arts and culture in the next 10 years, and then what do we need really to get there. some of the key themes that came up were what we need to develop, and through that is collaboration and community. I'm not going to read this. This is just kind of reiterating the things that you all said that we need to do. And you can go to the next slide. So the community piece is really big, and Julie already mentioned this, is that oftentimes we, as quote, the arts community on the left side there, in terms of artists, teachers, makers, the organizations, and our audiences that enjoy the arts are kind of off here as the arts field, the arts sector, right? But we're not necessarily fully engaged with the city and county electeds, the funders and donors that are out there that want to support the arts, and maybe some of the residents in the communities that we haven't yet connected with. So we really do need to figure out the ways to bridge those, not the divides, but really is getting more people engaged in what's happening over here and not kind of expecting the same folks to always support the work, engaging new people. And go ahead to the next one. But how do we do that? I mean, we really have to do it through collaboration. And honestly, this term is way overused, and we don't really know how to do it. We tend to work in silos, right? We tend to think, I need to protect my budget. I need to work and make sure that my organization is sustained. All totally valid things to do. I run a very small nonprofit that doesn't have a very large budget. So I do have to look out for my organization. But honestly, if we lift up the whole region, everybody does benefit. That's how the IE is going to move forward in supporting the arts and cultural field. We've talked a little bit about regional network alliances and really this like central hub that's going to drive advocacy and marketing. It's not necessarily going to be individual organizations that serve their communities, but really one or two central organizations that kind of drive that, having stronger county arts councils. I know that's one of my tasks for myself coming up in the next year as well. So how could we really collaborate more together is the key question there. And I think I have one more here. Yeah, so Arts for IU as the vision of bringing us all together was in order to start doing that, because Josiah, Vanessa, Patrick, and I were noticing that information wasn't really being shared widely all together, like patchwork, right, all over both counties. So how is that information getting to people, and how are we learning from each other across both counties, not just in my one city or in my one neighborhood? What are we doing that's working, and what are we doing that's not working? How do we really create stronger organizations through that collaboration? And honestly, through that process, we find ways to connect with community members that aren't in our current audience. We figure out these solutions together. So we've been meeting quarterly for the last 2 years, I believe, or it's close to 2 years. I can't remember at this point. But what we wanted to do with the last about 10 minutes of this meeting was to share with you what we had talked about doing, what our goals were for Arts for IU was to strengthen and build an advocacy platform for the region, to support collaborative projects, to build a policy proposal, and also to help folks find mentors of other organizations to help them grow their own capacity. So those are some of the goals of what the work has, why we came together. But honestly, we want to hear from all of you, like what's working or what else is needed, through that collaboration, through the convenings that we'll continue to curate, and through the professional development and arts leadership networking that we'll continue to offer you. The last one being fund development back in December, which is a fun mixer where we had Jose Marquez from the Community Foundation offer a really amazing presentation about fund development. I hope all of you were able to, well, actually only a few of you were able to attend that I can see here in the field, but we'll continue to do this. So we want to hear from you. How can we serve you better? What other pathways and opportunities have you noticed through coming to those meetings? Because a lot of you in this room have been to those meetings on a monthly or quarterly basis. So I'll stop talking, but we want to listen. And honestly, it's for you. That's why we do it. And that's why we're here. So, and things maybe you heard from Julie and the team that we can continue incorporating into our advocacy as a region.
a comment from John Machado in the chat. That wonderful, Jenny. The arts area is here to support these regional efforts as always.
Appreciate it.
We had hoped today to be able to do this in person, and we were very close to actually doing that. But of course, one thing and another sort of added up against that. But we do hope in the near future that we will be able to do one of these convenings up close and personal. And because we have a very, very large area to serve, we'll be looking to do them a little bit here and there. So we're not going to expect everybody to drive to Riverside. We will take them out into some of the far reaches of the service area. Yeah, and we all know, many of us know each other, and looking forward to getting to know those who I don't know personally. I know that Jenny knows many that I don't, but please feel free to reach out outside of this forum as well, because that space does exist. And I know some of you are able to take advantage of that, and do take advantage as a bad term to use. But it's always something that I say is the most gratifying part of the work that I do. And I know that others like Jenny and Julie feel the same way. When there are needs to be met, it feels good to be able to meet them.
So
I mean,
again,
I just want to reiterate that, you know, what is it that you need? Like, is it more local toolkits? Is it data? What is it? Like, try to really think, like, when you're going to go to that meeting, what's something you want to be able to pull up really quickly that's really going to help push your conversation forward with that elected. Recently, I've met with the County Workforce Development Board, and it was really effective for me to say, hey, did you know that there's 40,000 creative workers in San Bernardino County and only 20,000 of them have jobs? And that statistic is in the Arts for IE report that we sent all of you. So I don't know if you're using the resources that we sent you, but use that quote right there. So we need to do something about that gap. What is it that's not happening in terms of technical assistance, in terms of, you know, lifting up where the job pathways are? What is it that the field needs to connect the 50% of the people who are identified as a creative worker does not have adequate full-time employment or a living wage?
And I would echo that consistent, united messaging is really powerful too. So in other words, Jenny, if that's a quote that you use, that you saw their eyes kind of lift up, give that on a one sheet to everybody in your network as just 3 quotes that they can use instead of having to read a report. Cause I know I've got like 60 reports I should be reading right now that I need just a week off to read studies and reports. And I know that's hard for everyone. So the more that we can, you know, really just give each other the tools that are simple. And sometimes, you know, honestly, like a lot of times we're worried about, oh, but what if this data has holes in it or any of, I can share with you that they just hear it and then they're like, okay, like they just need to hear it over and over and over again. And that's going to make a difference. So definitely think that. And for us also, filling out that survey that if you didn't finish, I have no idea how many people were able to, definitely do that, because that really helps us. And this conversation on the side here around an industry trade association for arts and culture, that's something I've been thinking a lot about for our organization, for Californians for the Arts in particular. There isn't really one for that in California. Where do you go? I sit in a lot of meetings with the restaurant trade association, with the hotels trade association, with the winery trade association. And essentially we are now at the state level thought of as the trade association, but trade associations have some very specific services that we have not. We were really more of an advocacy service organization at this point. So it's interesting to hear if that's of need for people as well.
Christine.
Just to piggyback on that and what we're chatting about in the chat via health insurance and things, it would be super helpful if it can include like individual self-employed artists, because a lot of things, it's like even applying for different funding things, if you're not doing it like you know, if you are your own business and you're not attached necessarily to a nonprofit, you don't get, you aren't eligible. So I don't know, it would be really helpful to be able to say, hey, you know, working artists that are self-employed, we have this coalition where we can get, you know, advantages that trade associations would have. And it would give us some kind of, I don't know, I mean, I like the being part of building that reputation and status, and like creative workers, a creative workforce, officializing it. So yeah, ditto. Thank you.
It's also really helpful for us right now. We're in the process of redesigning our websites. And one of the things that we're thinking about is sort of the pathway if you are an individual artist or creative worker versus an arts organization, for-profit, nonprofit, kind of what are the tools and the resources that you're looking for. And really as our organization is again, we've grown, I mean, we're very small ourselves. I think everyone knows that, right? We just were able to hire 3 people, Tracy, Eduardo, and Kara. And so we're in this massive shift of who we are becoming as well, while at the same time trying to address some real crises out there and the continued crises and trying to do that type of lobbying. But you know, any information like that, please feel free to just email me or Tracy or anyone, Jenny and Patrick. Those types of thoughts are really helpful for us to understand what's the need and where are the gaps and who and how can we build towards that. So I think we have a couple more things we just want to quickly get to. Is that right? Because in these last couple of minutes.
Yes, thank you. Just one thought as a local advocate, I'm based in Ventura County, and one kind of galvanizing activity that you can get involved in your cities or your counties is getting involved in county planning, whether they're economic development plans or the general plan, which is the land use plan. Getting embedded as the creative sector as one of the priorities in any of those plans provides actionable items for city leadership and staff to then follow up with them. And that can be, I've had supervisors in our county ask, almost beg, come and demonstrate at supervisor meetings the value of the arts. Come be visible to us. Especially in these very dark times when there's been such contentious county meetings and such. But keep an eye out on the schedule of your local planning processes and build relationships with staff and electeds in those areas too can be very helpful as a place to start for some foundational change. And Christine, you're actually really launching us into what we want to share next, which is about Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month. The month of April is when we activate the entire state around the value of arts, culture, and creativity. And this year in particular, we're going to be highlighting creative workers, arts workers, culture bearers, individual artists, as well as the organizations. And the theme this year is the arts work, and different weeks will tackle different facets of that theme. Arts work to heal, arts work to build community, to advance justice, to empower youth, to stimulate economies, et cetera. So every week there will be webinars and action items, action activities to take related to those themes. And we also will provide advocacy training and opportunities for you to engage with your elected officials on the state level, tools for engaging on the local level, all culminating in Advocacy Week, where we will schedule delegate meetings with your state officials. We ask folks around the state to become captains and organize delegations or become delegates, and we'll provide the resources and tools that you need to build those relationships, make those asks. So we really hope you'll participate in Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month. And I'm going to turn it over to Julie real quick to talk about a workshop that we've got coming up in the next week. Next slide.
Yeah, it might be sold out already, and I apologize. It's a limited webinar that we're doing in collaboration with theater producers of Southern California. And it is on AB5 in the arts, but it will be recorded. I'm actually meeting with that group tomorrow just to kind of work out some of the details. But yes, it's going to be very specific to the performing arts, theaters, dance companies, volunteers working within that realm. So if you try to sign up and it's sold out, just let us know that there's more demand for it so we can figure that out as well. Next slide.
And
Yes.
Kara.
Yes. And before we say goodbye, we also want to invite you to join us as a member. We are both the California Arts Advocates and Californians for the Arts are member-based organizations, and our members help make our work possible. So thank you to all of you here today who are members. We'll put a link in the chat on how to join and more information. And also thank you to our funders who also make our work possible.
And with that, we just want to thank everyone for joining us today. We're right here on the dot at 2:30. To our amazing board members in your region and to our partners for today's regional conversations. Sorry, I'm on I think my 6th meeting of the day, so Zoom meeting, so I'm starting to get a little blurry. Anyway, I so appreciate all of you for showing up here today. Please do reach out to us. We do want to hear from you. Fill out that survey, engage, and I know together we can make a difference because, hey, man, we're the arts. We transform lives and communities, and so we will continue to do that. And we thank you again for all of your hard work. We know it's difficult out there right now, so thank you.
Yeah. And we'll be